Hello, and welcome to Mapping the College Audition. I'm your host, Charlie Murphy, director of MTCA. That's Musical Theater College Auditions. Check us out at mtca.com. And today we've got Michael Campayno from Point Park University on the pod. For our newer listeners, this is another one of our college deep dive episodes where we explore the landscape of the college theater world and try to demystify this daunting audition process. This is another one of our Act 2 episodes, which we are now successfully weaving into our continued new exploration with new schools. I feel really good about the balance of what we're doing there, though, of course, always happy to hear feedback from you all. If you're interested in going wider or deeper, right? Do you want more of those Act 2, Act 3, Act 4 with some of your favorite school? Or do you like more exposure to more kinds of newer programs? Always a balancing act for us. So please do let us know. You know, that's mailbag at mappingthecollegeaudition.com for any feedback. We're always considering stuff like that. You know, we're considering how many emerging programs, how many acting only programs on, you know, that's going to target a certain segment of listeners, but is less exciting for others. You know, we're trying to do it all, of course, but only as quickly as we can, one episode a week. And to that end, I'm going to give you a bit of a behind the scenes look, which is a nice little theme to what we had in our conversation with Michael. And he gave you a big behind the table look in the Point Parks process, that we have now officially begun actual podcast conversations about the two things I promised you in that post Pittsburgh Unifieds episode, which is one, a directory, and two, some kind of highlight reel style episodes that we're going to try to weave in for shorter episodes for those who don't want to listen to a full hour. I do think both will help with some of what we're talking about there above in terms of the organization on your end, you know, the ability to discover different kinds of programs more easily for you. Someone reached out to me recently and said, you know, you should really consider doing this podcast, but having some acting programs on. And I was like, we do, of course, we do. For those who are regular listeners, I'm preaching to the choir. You may know that. Not only do we have MT schools that have acting programs to talk about those, but we've also had a nice number of non-MT acting only programs on as well. But what it made me realize in that question was you wouldn't necessarily know that just looking at the titles of episodes if you don't know all of the schools that are acting only versus MT or some combination, right? If you're just doing a quick scroll, I know that can be really tough. One of the parents at PUA was miming them scrolling through their phone, how deep of scroll they do if they look for certain schools. So I do think we can help all of you with all of that for sure. And we will. I do resolve to do it. And now that I've said it publicly, I'm committed to it. I do think this episode, though, was a really great conversation. For those who are watching the video, you get a bit of my childhood bedroom in Pittsburgh. I was recording this episode right after PUA while celebrating my mom's 70th birthday. So happy birthday, Mama. But you will hear Michael and I think we have a bit of familiarity, of course, because he's a former MTCA coach. And I think we were able to have a few of these conversations a bit differently than it's sometimes possible when I'm talking to a brand new stranger. Though, of course, I do try to hold those new people I'm meeting to a pretty high bar and a pretty high standard of conversation when I can. But I think you can really feel, Michael and my similar background in a lot of it, from him being a Pittsburgher and a Carnegie Melloner to, of course, his time as an MTCA coach. And there's a lot of philosophical overlap. And I think we can go pretty deep on some of those conversations. So I do think this will also be a really interesting listen for people who feel like they know what Point Park is, or maybe what Point Park was. You'll hear the way Michael describes it as very different from the Point Park I knew growing up. And I think, that sounds like a thoughtful and intentional change on their part. So we'll talk about that a little bit in the interview, and then I'll talk a little bit more about that in the takeaway as well. As far as those MTCAers, I'm really looking forward to seeing many of you in Chicago and LA in the next 2 weeks, as I enjoyed seeing so many new faces at the New York City mock most recently. Man, for those of you, those parents out there in that parent meeting, that was a stressful meeting, wasn't it? Or did you all feel like, oh, this feels like a tense meeting? It definitely felt a different tone to our September and October meetings. And I think it's just the time of year, it's a time of year and maybe a little bit what's going on in the world. It's election day as I record this, and just how people are feeling about the world. I mean, all of the parents were so lovely. None of the parents brought any energy that wasn't positive to it, but you could just feel the tension and the stress of everything that people are going through with the process right now. And I just want to say, I guess, that I think that is totally normal for this time of year and in this process generally. And I think in so many ways, this is the hardest part, right? There is difficult stuff ahead. I don't want to pretend like there's nothing that's difficult ahead for you, but there's also a lot of fun ahead. for those who are still in the thick of like pre-screens and applications this month, as you run into actual deadlines that are coming up, that's not so fun, right? Some of our folks who started really early and are getting back positive pre-screen results, that is pretty fun. I do think we have a number of families who did start early and who are in that place where they really are ready artistically and they're saying, it's all worth it. Man, I put that effort in and now I'm getting all these positive pre-screen results and I'm feeling really good about their process. They probably have hard stuff ahead still for them, but there are people who are in that place. But then, of course, along with those positive results, there can be rejections too. So that's another thing you got to weave into the stress of this November month. So I would just say, all in all, I think this is about as stressful a time period as this process can bring. Whereas a couple months from now in those main auditions, again, it's just a little more fun. It's still big and stressful, but it's more fun. And I think there's also a little bit less like you have less control then. I think in some ways it's so stressful now because there is still time to make changes. There's time to add schools. There's time to refilm pre-screens. You still have time before a lot of deadlines, right? So you feel the pressure of like what you can do. Once you're there and you're looking down the barrel of Chicago Unifieds, you do just kind of throw caution to the wind and dive in with what you can do in the next couple of days, right? All of which is to say, I'm really saying all of this. I'm saying it, I guess, in a stressful way as I talk quickly, but just to say, we're going to get there. You're going to get there. It will get better. I don't mean to sound like an it gets better campaign, but it does get better. It gets better. It gets easier, and you're all going to get there. You might not believe it right now, but a couple months from now, again, I keep using that analogy. You're going to have multiple options. You're going to be negotiating between multiple options, and it's going to be great. Okay, and with that, I'm sending you all love, and I hope you enjoy this interview with the lovely Michael Campayno from Point Park University. Well, we are so excited to be joined by Michael Campayno. Michael has a degree from Carnegie Mellon University and an MFA in progress from this very Point Park, where we're going to do some speaking. Michael has been on Broadway in The Cher Show, Wicked, has been in The Sound of Music on the NBC's live telecast of The Sound of Music. Also HBO Max is the other two. Of course, Michael's most important credit in life is having his many years as an MTCA song coach as well. But now he is the director of musical theater at Point Park University, which is still located in Pittsburgh, PA. They take classes of about 30 MTs. They have degrees in MT, acting, ballet, jazz, modern, some cool stuff like that. Michael, welcome on the show. How are you feeling today?
Charlie, I'm great. It's great to see you again. I've missed you.
Now it's two papas. Now a young papa yourself,
Yes.
And can't wait to get the girls together.
Yeah, life really happens all at once.
Yeah,
That's
the truth. While you're making other plans, as I say.
Exactly.
I was say so for our listeners, many of you have done these before, but this is another one of our Act 2 episodes. So we've had Ziva Barzell on a few years back, and like with all these Act 2 updates, I'm going to ask some of the questions that I asked previously, but some of this, not necessarily every single thing that we covered then. So if our listeners want a full picture of both the history and a little bit more on Point Park, I invite you to listen back to that episode. Some people like to pause it, listen to that episode, and then hear the update. It's up to you. This will be your 2025 snapshot. Michael, is there anything before we dive into Point Park that people should know about, like your history before coming to Point Park, or any fun facts, tidbits just about you before we dive into the school?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's funny when I hear my credits because I forget. I think the thing and why I became a teacher was just because when I was studying in undergrad at CMU, that was the most creative, explorative, exciting time for me, and it made this craft make sense, and it actually made myself more of myself.
Yeah.
And I carried that with me throughout my whole career. And the funny thing was, after undergrad, I was like, "Oh, I'm done. I studied. I'm ready to go," without kind of just the headspace of it's a continual process and finding your way back to your process.
Yeah.
So that's really important for me. And it ultimately kind of led to me choosing to leave New York City and go into education and kind of communicate that to this next generation. So it's just amazing to be back here. It's very full circle for me, and especially talking with MTCA.
That's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, you are now, I mentioned a number of Act 2 episodes, but you're also now, we got the one for the thumb, and we're over a full handful of MTCA coaches who are now teaching at programs and now directors of programs. It's just amazing, sort of. All those many years ago, if you would have told me that was true, who would have known?
I know, it's brilliant. It's so exciting.
It's really exciting. It's really exciting. Okay, but let's dive into Point Park a little bit. And, you know, knowing, of course, that you're still newer to the program. So, of course, you're still getting to know and discover. And really, you getting to know what Point Park is also changing what Point Park is, right? In that
Yeah.
beautiful way. But tell me, like, from your experience, what is a Point Park student? If you were to sort of give me an overview of, like, hey, my experience now taking in the faculty, taking in the students, what is a Point Park student compared to some others programs and things that you've known about?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think the image of Point Park, just because it has been connected to such an amazing dance school, has been this idea of triple threat, dancer, first, whatever they want to
Yep.
say. I don't prescribe to any of that, but what I see and what I'm getting to know and love is just true artists. I think what I'm encouraging them and what they seem to hold on to really well is that nobody kind of graduates with a specific degree title. Of course you do, but in the industry, no one's going out as a musical theater major.
Right.
And I think that was the biggest thing that opened my eyes when I got to New York, was that I was mostly auditioning for television and commercials. So this generation, especially at Point Park, really understands that. They're curious for it, they're hungry for it, and they're hungry to shape not only the next year, but the next 5 years, the next 10 years of what theater will be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really exciting. The idea of not prescribing to type and not looking at where they can fit in now, but what they want to create in the next 5 years is really exciting. So I would say true little artists, which I love deeply, and that's my mission. Uh, so yeah, I understand, and we are still connected to this unbelievable dance school, which is to our benefit. But the program, the curriculum, actually has so much more to offer that I feel like is not in the image.
I love that. I mean, and I think that's something a lot of programs wrestle with when you have a strong reputation, especially if it's something you want to shift about it. We did this a little bit with Rachel Stevens, who's now at CCM. It was one
Oh
of
my
our also one of our
gosh.
coaches.
Yeah.
But that same thing where it's like, you know, there's an image of what CCM has been, and now we want to not lose the good stuff, but how do I shape the other things? So it's like, how do you not lose that amazing reputation in dance, which of course Point Park has. That is what has put it on the map, and what for
Right.
many years people go, they graduate some amazing dancers, but then bring in some of these forms of other things. I'd love to, like, can you let us a little bit behind the curtain as much as you want to in terms of, like, the experience of those conversations, right? I know, like Gary Klein, our old professor, also is involved
Yeah.
with Point Park. So, like, as you think about, like, hey, I'm coming on and I'm gonna make some of these shifts. I'm
Yeah.
trying to, like, take in Point Park's, you know, where we are on the landscape, where we want to be. Can you let us know about, like, you know, some of those ambition conversations, some of those, like, you don't have to tell me all your strategy of how the sausage is made, but, like, what is that conversation of going, I think we're going to do more of this. Here's how we're going to achieve some of that more holistic artistry as opposed to where we came in.
Charlie, these are such good questions. I'm
Of
inspired
course.
just by these questions. Yeah, I think that's
Professional, Michael. We're in year 5. Come on. We got this podcast down.
that's a beautiful question. It's so important for people to hear, because not only are things presented on the website and buzzwords, but you're right. It's really about what's happening behind the table. And our conversation with Keisha Lalama, too, who created the Jimmy Awards, and Gary Klein, like you said, from CMU, our conversation has always been, what is a conservatory in 2025?
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean? Because I remember leaving CMU, which is very rep training. And my friends and I would talk about it when we were in New York, and we were mostly auditioning for, big commercialism, capitalism, Broadway.
Yep.
And we were like, is our training, did we need all of this? And I was always of the proponent to say yes. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I felt like this foundation is what allowed me to go into television, Broadway, film, all of that. So it's really just continuing to ask the question of what is a conservatory in 2025. Within that, I mean, even at CMU, right, we took acting classes for 3 hours 3 times a week.
Yep.
Is the attention span there? Are we still getting enough from that? But I still really do believe in the freshman and sophomore year being completely foundational.
Yep.
Meaning classes come first, and we are building as much foundation and progression, step 1, step 2, step 3, from those 2 years, so that junior year can become more process based into performance, and then senior year is marketability and sending you out there into the industry.
Yep.
So within that, it's it's a lot of piloting and not trial and error. I think that's what's challenging for new students to hear too. No, we're experts in our field, we all are, but it really is always student serving and what's best for the students. So our conversation again, yeah, what is a conservatory? How helpful are class times, things like that. But for me, and this always rings true, and it rings true for our leadership team too. Is just acting is the foundation of what we do.
Yep.
That's really prevalent in our curriculum for musical theater majors and acting majors. We're all storytellers. And with that foundation, from there, we can go into niche kind of parts of this industry where almost musical theater, it's not a niche part, but if I could count the amount of auditions I did in New York, musical theater was probably 25% of it.
Yep.
So just making sure these students have a really strong foundation of acting, and within that, allowing them to really be themselves is really important. We don't really prescribe to typing or things like that. It's more about their story and how they want to fit into the industry and what they want to make of it. Does that?
That's all very well said. I mean, and it seems like bringing some, of the experiences, at least you mentioned both you and Gary have CMU connections. So bringing some more acting that were, as a lead into the program. What does that mean in terms of literal curricular changes? Again, I know you said some things are piloted. We may not have, these are definitively going to be what it will be for the next 20 years. But like, what does that mean in terms of, are we talking about adding acting class time or changing acting class time or adding classes? How has the curriculum changed in the past couple of years, especially?
Yeah, so I think, and like you said, everything is valid, right? We live in a very subjective art form. So
I did not say everything is valid. So just you're quoting. Like I said, I might have implied everything was valid, but I did not say.
I think, yeah, it's like there is that conversation that is just very out there of like, am I training to be an ensemble or a lead, right? And both of them are extremely valid, and that's kind of what I meant to say in that. There's not one is better than the other. What I believe in and what I truly know how to do is create those little artists. So within that, it's looking at moving acting to 3 days a week. Also, too, the big change, I think, is really that the acting majors and the MT majors all take these same classes in the freshman and the sophomore year. And then in the junior year, we can go to our more field of study where we have a junior lab, which is new musical development. We have a cabaret with composers. But not getting there until we're all this one cohort. We have the same vocabulary and the same foundation to then go that way. So yeah, that looks like mostly, MT's taking movement, which is way different than dance, which is a conversation that we need to have. And obviously just having the same foundation of voice and speech, movement, and acting that the actors do, so we all can feel grounded in just the foundation. So that's happening.
Yep, that's great. I mean, it's really well said, and we talk about it a lot on this pod, especially with our artist episodes, which we could do a separate artist episode almost with you too. But just talking about like that permeable membrane between musical theater and acting, of both what you said, a lot of our MTs who end up doing plays and TV and film, but also our actors who end up on Broadway because they go that this is where the money is in theater. If you're not doing TV and film, likely you're spending some time singing or dancing or doing one of the two. I'd love to hear about, like, even within the musical theater, what does it look like in terms of, let's say I am somebody who is a really strong dancer and thinks, and that's one of the reasons Point Park is really high on my list. What is that going to look like in terms of the dance training I would get? And is that different? I know now not everyone who's accepted Point Park necessarily is the highest level dancer. So how does it work if I'm at a different level and I'm coming in?
Yeah, so we actually cut the dance audition to gain admission to our program. And the thought behind that is that we are such a strong dance school that I do trust, no matter the talent level coming here, they're going to grow in that sense. Obviously, and just, it's my subjective opinion. Like, I think the acting and singing is just going to allow me to get to know the student way more. And that's what I prioritize. Yep. In terms of, and this is a great question too, in terms of really strong dancers looking to hone that more, that is something I do want to lessen in our curriculum to make room for movement and acting. And that's the beautiful thing too, is that shift is kind of coming where I know Roosevelt has a program that I have a lot of students in, MT Dance, yep. Where they can focus a little more on that. So I would say that's just not where the direction the program's going anymore.
So meaning if I was someone who goes, I understand that's not my MT degree, but if I wanted to take extra dance or I wanted, that's not necessarily as possible, or it's not encouraged in the same way that an MTD program would.
So it is actually. We do have a dance minor. It just gets challenging because, BFA credits, like the minimum amount of credits for a BFA program, I believe is 120 or 121, and ours is 133 already. So the option and the allowance to...
And that's 133 just within the BFA, you're saying?
Yeah, just within the BFA musical theater, yeah. So I think the allowance to minors is a little more challenging, but we do have students who do it. So it's just if you're ready to commit that time to it. And we also do have summer dance and things like that. So there are more options of times.
Yep.
Just in the immediate of what I'm focusing on with you in the classroom, in the curriculum, it is going to be less dance.
Shifting more toward that. It totally makes sense. Yeah. And then give me if you have a sense of the rough percentage, like, within that 133 credits, I think you said 131 credits, what non acting, singing, dancing credits are taking? So what percentage of academic credits am I getting for the BFA that go beyond acting, singing, dancing, even like theater history? Like, what is the stuff that I have to do outside of, in the broader university outside of the theater program?
Yeah, so transparently, I mean, Point Park offers a lot, or requires a lot of university credits, which I think about 42 credits, which is more. But I think what also that allows is that you're studying a lot more fundamental things in not the real world, but the muggle world of being a real person and not a theater major, which is pretty brilliant. They also do offer a fast track for a master's program where you do have to spend the summers, I believe, studying, but you could leave within 4 or 5 years with a master MBA, or there's another option too. But that sounds unbelievable. In this time of just creation, and I think the industry is fine. I know people are alarmist and they're like, Broadway, bro, what's happening? It's the revolution of theater that will always just come back up. But
right now it's more like Hollywood, what's happening. But yeah, okay, that's my fear of what's happening to Hollywood. But yes.
The revolution. I believe in the revolution of art, but
we don't know what it'd be, but it'd be something different and amazing and new. I mean, who would have predicted Netflix? Who would have predicted all these things?
Right. So I think the interesting thing that Point Park is offering, it's not a plan B, but it's just an option to help out a student who might have other curiosities or just want more of a security with a master's.
So for those math majors out there, you're talking about something like an 80-20 split of credits. But also interesting, it's not always exactly fair that a credit hour is a credit hour, but that's a lot of total credits. You're talking about 174, 175, whatever that number is, credits. That's a lot of credits.
Yeah, credit hours, that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of, and again, conservatory in 2025, it's a lot of time, but this is why I champion higher education, because if you're going to take 4 years, take 4 years and go and fail and focus, because the industry definitely doesn't allow you that time to kind of train as you're trying to enter the industry.
Yep. Well, what a perfect segue there in terms of how do you prepare? I'd love to hear sort of how you prepare your students generally to launch into the industry. So how they feel ready to meet the professional world. And then let's talk about stuff like Showcase and how that works.
I love it. This is a really a topic I feel really responsible for. I do really think it is our jobs and our responsibility to connect these students to the industry and help them get that first breakthrough. I even after they graduate, I want to be in conversations, mentoring students, even when they're not physically with me. So Gary Klein is a master at this, as you know. Gary Klein started a cabaret with the seniors that we do downtown at the Greer Cabaret Theater, and he brings in some famous composer. So Kuman and Diamond are coming in.
It's 2 famous composers.
Yeah. Kuman and Diamond are coming in November to do a cabaret with our seniors. So they basically sing their music. They get to meet the composers, and they get to kind of work professionally with them. Yep. And Gary did that at CMU too. We did with Stephen Schwartz and Stephen Flaherty and all those people. Yep. So that's a great connector. Also, too, we are really invested. Our head of private voice, who also does a lot of new work. We have a section in the junior year in the spring semester called Junior Lab, which is new musical development. And what that looks like is a whole semester with a creative team who's actually still workshopping a musical. And hopefully the goal is that it will get integrated into our season the next year so that the team can see the developmental side of it into the production side of it, which is obviously so important for students because that is majority of the work they're going to be doing is this new musical readings, just new songs. So it helps their skills in learning that, creating, and knowing that they have a lot of power in the beginning process of creating what this is by being the actors, obviously. So yeah, I mean, I think, and within that, it's just guests. Like Steph, the good thing about Pittsburgh is a lot of people are just coming in now to do concerts, things like that. So Stephanie J. Block came in last spring. I brought her into Point Park, things like that.
You worked with during Share?
Yeah, I was our scene partner in Share. So she so graciously came in, and that real world experience is invaluable for them, and it just re-inspires them. So,
and then what about the showcase experience? So how does that work?
Showcase, one of my favorite things in the world. So yeah, we begin that at the beginning of the senior year. We are doing our showcase this year during spring break, so March, so pretty early. And that was a strategic decision to just go up early so they have the last 2 months of their senior year to be able to go and visit with agents and audition. Yes, so we're actually working with Gary as well, and Ingrid Sonicson, who was also a CMU professor who's done plenty of showcases.
Produced my year at least.
Yeah. Oh, she's the best.
Yeah.
Taught me everything I know. So yeah, I mean, we take everybody. There's not an audition to go. I do think it's something they deserve. And
just want to underline that not audition to go. That's was a shift from the past. That there was a point where with Point Park you did have to audition. It was a little bit more amorphous. Sometimes it was, did you elect to do it versus audition? But it wasn't everybody. But you're saying now everybody gets to do it who wants to do it.
Oh, yes, 100%. The BFA Musical Theater and Acting both go, and we do a combined showcase in New York. We stay up there for about 3 days, which the school pays for, which is deeply brilliant. And yeah, everybody goes. It's a part of the curriculum, too. It's kind of a senior capstone, a senior project that they finish off of. And yeah, I'm just so excited for it this year. So in the interim, we'll bring agents and everything and casting directors just to watch them and get to know them. And it's part of our job.
I love it. You mentioned some of the cool downtown spaces. Can you give me a sense of, like, for those who've not been to Pittsburgh or don't know where Point Park is, just sort of what the campus feels like in terms of, like, what is my campus life going to feel like at Point Park?
Yeah, so the good thing about Point Park and the future of it is it's kind of overtaking one area. It's buying buildings on this street called Wood Street, which it's on. So even though it is an urban campus and you're in a city, there's enough space and land of Point Park that there is a section that feels like this is ours. The other great thing, too, is it's a very transitional city. So, I mean, it's a 5-minute walk to the Cultural District, where you have one of the biggest regional houses, the Benham Center. Within that, the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust is just so good with events. They bring all of these Broadway people in to do concerts. There's all of the Broadway tours that come through. So that's a 5-minute walk from campus. It's a great transitional city in the sense that it's not overwhelming. It's very easy to navigate. It's very easy to walk around. It's very easy to take buses and Ubers to Pitt or Carnegie Mellon. That's the other great thing about Pittsburgh is it is a college town.
A lot of schools, yeah.
Where that cross-pollination happens for sure. So I always just think it's absolutely not as overwhelming as New York or Chicago.
For sure.
It feels like a very hometown city.
Yep. And you say transitional, meaning like if you're from the boonies, you could go to Pittsburgh before you come to New York or whatever. If you're
exactly. Yeah. Because I spent my whole life in Pittsburgh, and then all of a sudden I was in New York, and there's a transition there. It takes some time.
You don't realize how Midwestern Pittsburgh is until you show up in New York. And then you're like, oh, actually, I used to be like, I'm not Midwestern, I'm from Pittsburgh. We're on the East Coast. And they're like, no, it's a little Midwestern compared to
Exactly. Yeah, but it's exciting.
Give me a little bit of, I meant to ask this earlier when we were talking about the dancer shift, or the shift away from like thinking of yourself as dancer first. What do you think in terms of the complexion of your students? How many of those students do you think come in now and are very strong dancers? Like, do you have a lot of very strong dancers who are going, I want to work more on acting? Or do you now find a lot of students who go, dance is actually not particularly part of what I'm interested in. I'm interested in this holistic artist stuff that you're talking about.
That's a great question. I think I think that most of the students there understand themselves as actors and want to grow in that sense.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I think this is my second semester teaching, so I'm still getting to know a lot of them, but uh, yeah, I would say actors. Yeah, I was going to try to elaborate on it, but
Oh, that's a great, it's a great answer. And it's also, we talk about those like branding conversations and some of the behind the scenes stuff too. It's also interesting in terms of sometimes that can take a couple of years to permeate into the industry, people to get to know like, hey, this is actually moving in a different direction, or this is a different
yeah.
thing. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
cool.
and I think I do think my thought behind that is like I think there are some unbelievable dancers in musical theater programs, and just in my experience, the dancers in Wicked, the dancers in the Cher Show, they were dancers. They were like competition dancers. So my idea is that like if the goal currently in this industry is to be a dancer on Broadway, I'm not sure if a musical theater program, if that training is specific enough to compete against these people who are currently in these ensembles in New York.
Yeah, it does seem like there's now, as you look at the like rings of the tree, there are plenty of dancers who are like competition dancers. That is what they do. There's also like the next level is all swings. Is all people who really can do are good enough at all three that they really can cover leads, because you have to cover. There's like three
Yeah,
covers now to all these leads, but then also you have to really be a good ensemble member, which means a great mover and all these
exactly.
things.
Yeah, and these companies are smaller, so everybody who is in the ensemble is absolutely covering all of the parts.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That is a skill set. That I mean, I'm plenty good at math, normal math, whatever that math of like movement and hold. Like if you're playing four different parts and you have to move scenery in four different ways and have to keep that in your head, that's where I'm like, I can't. I would not have had that skill set to try to
same,
swing.
same.
That's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about cost. So our crack research team comes up with the tuition of about $50,000, 49,760 at least is what Google says. Let's talk about how does that work with students in terms of, we talked this weekend, most people don't pay sticker price at these places. How do you end up not paying sticker price? Is it mostly need-based? Is it mostly academic money? Are you getting a lot of talent-based money? How do I bring that number down for myself?
Yeah, so there are definitely artistic scholarships. That is something I feel like Point Park is really good at. It also is need based, which I work really closely with the person who kind of facilitates all this, and yeah, the work that I've seen them do to just help families is brilliant, and that's something that's deeply important to me because college is wildly expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, mostly artistic scholarships for sure, and then it becomes need based, and the team does an amazing job of handling it from there. That's kind of the specifics I know about it.
And more artistic than academic, you're saying. So it's not likely that I'm going to get a huge academic scholarship right out of the gate because I have a good GPA.
I wish I could answer that.
Fair enough.
And
Fair
after
enough.
we hang up this call, I'm gonna
No, no, no.
call
You're
admissions.
allowed to know the things that you know and not all the things. That's totally okay. In fact, I always like it when professors can kind of model vulnerability because not everyone knows everything. So I know this and I'm an expert on this, but not this is great. I'm trying to do that as a father now more and more. I'm trying to do more like, you know what? Daddy doesn't know. Daddy made a mistake. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, see, this is actually my first audition season running the auditions, so I'm sure I'll learn much more much quickly.
What a perfect transition into. All right, we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to talk all about the audition process in a flash.
Perfect.
All right, we're back with Michael Campayno. And despite him saying this is his first time, we're going to dive deep into the audition process and talk about how it works or how we think it's going to work and all those things. I'd love to start off just, let's talk about where you're doing auditions. So what's the overview of your audition? If I'm going to be seen by Point Park at some point, how is that going to work in terms of starting from the pre-screen and then where might I be going in different places?
Yeah, our pre-screens are open now. They close December 1st. We've already begun reviewing them, so those decisions will probably go out soon if they haven't gone out already. From there, we do have a couple on-campus dates. We also do travel to Chicago Unifieds, New York Unifieds, and we travel to LA as well.
Also, unless you're breaking bad news for us on the podcast, you're going to be with us in December
I
at
am.
MTCA.
Yes, I am. I'm so excited. December 14th or 12th for all of them. I'll
Well,
be
you're
there.
going to show up December 14th, and we're going to see what happens. We'll see if that's too late for you. Let's talk a little bit at all of these auditions. I would love to hear kind of separately the video portion of it, and then also the live auditions, wherever those are happening. What are you looking for that let's start with a pre-screen. What are you looking for that ultimately leads to that yes or no? So as results are coming out, you said, right? So some people, you see them, you go, yes. Some people you see them, you go, that's not for me. What are you looking for that comes in that video?
Gosh, that's such a good question. You're such a good host.
Oh,
Have you
Michael.
been nominated for any podcast
What he's
award?
doing right now is he's giving compliments so he can think about the answer, right? That's a good tactic.
No, I know the answer. I'll tell you the answer. It's a challenging question, right? Because we live in such a subjective art form. But I do think there obviously are submission guidelines for sure. 90 seconds. It's just the rules of the game because there are so many to get through. Things like that. So making sure that the audition stays within the guidelines just feels very respectful and appropriate for everybody's time.
Yep.
From there, I like to think that there aren't rules to what we do, and especially this idea of auditioning. Like, we've made it so formal and militant where we're just not even in our bodies and we're just stuck staring in musical theater land.
Yep.
Because we're so just interested in our voice. But I really want to see some semblance of connection, of some opinion on the song. I want to know, this is the only audition where you can pick any material ever. For whatever reason, that it just has to be valid for yourself.
Yep.
And that's what I can see it. I can see it when a student has opinions with their song or feels confident in their song, and there's a reason why they're singing it, as opposed to I have a beautiful voice.
Yep.
Everybody has a beautiful voice, especially at this stage. And I just need to know some kind of idea of what artist are you? Why did you pick this song? How does this relate to you? What are you trying to tell me? So that's the most important for me. And it sounds intangible, right? But even in the rep choice, I think that's so important. And that's the thing that I love that MTCA would always do, is that you would never pick songs so you would come up with suggestions and things like that, but it came from the student and the artist and what they really loved. And that's what's so brilliant about MTCA.
Oh, that's so sweet. I got a compliment out of nowhere. I thought I cut you off from compliments because you were getting that answer, but then we came back to compliments. This is so great. Oh, we can keep going. I love this. Let me try to burrow down a little bit more. You mentioned, I think, it being intangible. I certainly understand why. But when you're looking at a video and you're talking about connection, like, what are you seeing, hearing? If you can try to describe, because I think, people have heard before, you have to like your song. You have to have a reason for picking your song.
Yeah.
How does that manifest for you when you're watching a video and going, that person has a connection here, or this person doesn't? Like, what are you seeing that sort of makes you sniff out, there's not much of a connection there?
Yeah, for me, I think it's, there's so many comments on acting, right? But it really is about being interested in something else, like letting the self-consciousness go and being interested in going to another place, right? Dropping in, whatever you want to call it. The joy of it too. It's like, I feel like you can tell when a student sings something that their voice teacher gave them versus a story in the text that they really love. And I think that's the biggest thing for me too, is the text. Like, did they read the text? Do they understand the story of it? Do they have a connection to that text as opposed to the song from it already? My answer is, like, I can see in somebody's eyes when they're connected, they're interested in something else. They've gone to a different place where, again, our job is to be private and public. So being really focused on just something else, even if it's an objective or if it's the color of the wall and that's affecting them.
Yep.
That kind of trying is what I really love and just connects me as a viewer. And again, like, we're not looking for little Broadway stars ready to go to the industry now. That's not what it is. We're just, I want to make sure that the want and the passion for this industry is rooted in something truthful, as opposed to, I want to be famous, because it's just the wrong industry to be in if you want to be famous.
It's beautifully said. And I'm just going to underline that idea of letting that self-consciousness go. I do think that's something our students, it's harder and harder. Again, I'm going to sound old, blaming TikTok and blaming whatever, but whatever the confluence of factors, compared to 15 years ago, compared to 10 years ago, the students have more trouble letting the self-consciousness go. And, we talked recently about the idea of being cringe or being worried about being embarrassing. Molly Griggs, who's a CMU alum, was on the pod. She was talking about that. She's like, you sometimes have to let yourself potentially be embarrassing like that. That I think is really hard for 17-year-olds today, in a way that I was actually embarrassing as a 17-year-old. I had other problems. I was too raw. It was too much, but I was very boldly willing to actually really embarrass myself. And I feel like that's rarer with 17-year-olds today.
Yeah, right. And and that's the beautiful thing though. We want to see you be private. And again, it's not even do I expect students to capture that essence fully? No.
Right.
No, but it's just that's what we're working towards. Because then or else it becomes presentational, right? And it's just I am singing, and
it's a beauty pageant with singing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it just everybody is talented at this stage. They just need to trust it. And what else is there to tell us about you?
I love it. And then, so how does that shift? I mean, you got into some of the broader conversation about the live audition, but what does it look like, or will it look like for you now when I'm in a callback? If I passed a pre-screen, now we're spending some time in the audition room, when we talk about interview questions and adjustments, or what else are you kind of teasing out as you go? Let's say they did bring a connection into material, but knowing ultimately we're going to end up with 30 students, you're going to see more than 30 students who are connected to their material. How do I ultimately end up in that yes pile? What are you teasing out during the actual live audition process that's going to help lead you to a yes or a maybe?
Yeah, I think my broad philosophy of that, and it's the right school will come to you. So there is just a subjectivity of not trying to get into every school, being authentically yourself and letting that school who sees you and value, come with you, which 100%. And I think our logistic process after this pre-screen phase is that we have 2 rooms. So basically they'll go in and they'll see Gary and they'll sing for Gary and they'll sing their songs for him. And then they come into my room and they'll do their monologues for me, so they can kind of separate just those 2. And from there, Gary and I and Amelia, who's the head of acting, will kind of just talk and give our opinions on this. But I think in that stage of the callback, it's definitely seeing people live, getting their energy, feeling who they are. And I think the biggest piece of advice I have is we definitely are looking for students for the next 4 years. So those advice lines that people hear all the time of people want to work with kind people is actually deeply true. Kind actors who are adaptable, who know who they are, which is a crazy statement to say at 17, 18. But for me, that just means asking questions about themselves. I want to know what their favorite TV shows are. I don't care if it's Love Island, I think, or Friends or anything. Knowing their favorite TV shows or maybe actors, or just a moment in their lives that they remember that really changed them in terms of theater, something they saw.
Yep.
Just getting to know them in that sense.
Yep. I love it. And do you have a sense about numbers when you talk about, total applications you're going to get, how many of those are going to get past the pre-screen, and then how many ultimate admits? I imagine you're saying yes to more than 30 to start, but maybe not, maybe start with 30 and do a bunch of wait lists. How does that work in terms of, if you start off with what, and then how does it cull down with each as part of the process?
Are you talking about from the pre-screen?
I'm actually starting from the initial application. So basically, how many are you applying, how many are passing the pre-screen, and then how many are getting the ultimate?
Yeah, I do think pre-screen numbers end up around anywhere from 1,200 to 1,500. I think that's common for schools now, which is insane.
Yep.
From there, I believe we invite around 350 to 400 to auditions all over, and they sign up from there. And then, then comes, the challenging part that is not, it feels personal, but is not personal at all. It's just finding people who speak your language, who have kind of the same vision and hope as you. And I want to accept students that I feel I can really help and guide and mentor,
Yeah.
I think a lot of what we do is just communication. So there are probably kids that I will get and kids that will get me, and then vice versa, right?
Yep. And what are you ultimately working toward in terms of, as you put together a cohort of people, of course, you're interested in those interesting artists and all those things you mentioned, you're looking for, of course, talent as whatever that means. But what are you thinking about as you put together that cohort in terms of, are you thinking about factors like, racial diversity and gender balance? Do you care if you have a balanced gender class? Do you care about height and size and geographical balance? Like, well, how do you factor in all those other things as you're thinking about putting together a class?
That's a great question. I am such a proponent of all of these changes happening in the industry because to me, theater is what's happening in real life. We're seeing real life people. So the more that I can advise a cohort and bring them in of what people see every day in real life, as opposed to that being curated, that is what matters to me, as opposed to kind of a gender split or height or anything like that. It's just about real people being in this art form. Does that make sense when I say that?
Totally makes sense. And that means, so theoretically, of the people you accept, then whoever accepts you back, if you're accepting 50 or 60 or whatever number to yield whatever you're going to get, you're going to go, this is, we're going to end up how we end up. This is the magic sauce that we put together.
Yeah. I don't think there's a big picture before that.
Yep.
I think it's pretty individual, case by case.
I love it. And what about in terms of the academics? If somebody, if you love them artistically, how does it work with the academics at Point Park in terms of them needing to get in the university, you having to fight them? How does that work in terms of the academic end of things?
Yeah, so that's a real conversation too. Students don't get notified if they're even in or not before they apply academically, because the academics do actually really matter in the sense that if you don't get admitted academically, we actually cannot accept you into the conservatory, which I understand.
Yep, totally makes sense. Okay. What about in terms of, are you looking at any kind of balance? Do you think about, when you mention those holistic artists, are you thinking about anything in terms of their artistic talent? So is there anything in terms of going, hey, I really want to make sure I do have some people who are more dancers first, or some people who are more singers first, or some people, are you thinking about, even the shows that you might be putting on? Are you thinking I need to have a certain number of tenors and a certain number? How do you think about that in terms of their artistic skill sets?
That's really good. Again, I do think that is a case by case kind of conversation and class by class conversation, but definitely not trying to replace classes that left. And then I think it is our job too, because that is a conversation that we have a lot with our artistic committees, is that we are picking shows for them, which is definitely true. But I don't think that conversation comes till later. So it's kind of, I like this part of the process. I'm not expecting anything. I'm kind of letting things happen and come to me, and from there creating a plan. So in terms of students auditioning, like what we're looking for, there's nothing more that they can do than just be themselves, their authentic selves.
Yeah, I love it. What about, is there any part, you mentioned that you have to get in first, is there any part of the academic application that you look at? Are you reading essays? Are you reading letters of recommendation? Is anything from that perspective that you're going to interact with?
Yeah, I read letters of recommendation and then everything unaccepted. I actually love looking at resumes just to get to know them more and see if I have any connection to them, see if they are from MTCA or Pittsburgh. What it does for me is just creates conversation starters so I can get to know them a little bit more. So all of that, yeah, everything they submit, I make sure to track down and look at all of it.
I love it. As we move to wrapping up here, you mentioned, of course, being a previous MTCA coach, and we're hearing some great foundational being your authentic self. I'm like, this is fantastic. This is all great. We agree, of course. We're from the same training program. We also come from MTCA together. But I'd love to kind of hear, what are the insights that you feel like you've gleaned from your years as both as MTCA coach, and then I know also in Pittsburgh you were doing prep for this help, for young high school students who are, about to do these auditions, now flipping on the other side of the table. What do you think you gleaned from being a coach about how to help the students, which now you're seeing from the other side of it?
Yeah, I love that question. I love MTCA because the values that you put forth, especially in your coaching, are just so important and so correct. There isn't a formula to this whole thing. And I think I've been working with high school kids, I don't know, 10 years or something, but there really isn't a formula to it. And the more you can mentor them for themselves to be happy leaving the room is the most important. important. We live in an industry where our job is for people to clap for us, or for the person on the other side of the table to validate us. So my biggest learning, even for myself, was internal validation and being able to just mentor these students and get them through the tough times. Because again, not only in the college audition, but this industry, your arc is like this. It's never just an upwards trajectory. Having people there for you in that way is so important to kind of remind you who you are, because you will forget who you are.
Can you expand on internal validation for me? What do you mean when you say internal validation?
Internal validation. So, I think when I got to New York, I was ready to be whatever they wanted me to be. And so I would go into rooms thinking, what do they want? What do they want me to see? What can I be for them? It left me with giving them all the power. So I was taking my worth, or who I was, or my talent, and giving it to somebody else to tell me if I was good or worthy or able to be here. I shifted my mindset after like 8 years in New York to kind of go into rooms how I wanted to perform this how I wanted to, and what made me feel good. So I felt good leaving the room, not caring if I got the job or not. It's similar, I feel like, in this college process where people make meaning of getting into a bunch of schools, or this specific school, or the top 10, and I think that I don't prescribe to that. I think everybody's on their own journey, and things happen for absolute reasons. And at the end of the day, like, we have to come home feeling proud of what we did and proud of ourselves. It has to be internal in that sense.
Yes. That's so well said. And I wanted to tease it out because it seemed like there's a version of like, I'm really good, which also I think people need, of like the confidence, like, I am really good, I can do this.
Yeah.
But it seems like you're also internal validation. You're really saying it's like, what I have to share is valid. My point of view is valid. I don't need to do it the way you think. I'm not looking and searching to say, is this right? But saying, this is right because I say it's right. It doesn't mean it's the only right way, but there's a point of view that is strong and confident coming from themselves.
Yeah. And that lesson goes from, college auditions to being in class in college to the industry. You say what I say, just 10 times better.
No, I'm just trying to be the mirror back to you. It's our job. I am your mirror. But it's so true. I mean, you'll see, especially early in your career, is like you're trying to ask casting directors, like, what are they looking for? It's like, they don't know. Like, they often can give you tips of like, hey, they've seen this, just so you know, heads up, this direction's not helpful. You go, okay, great. So they've seen it, but like, they're still waiting for like, what is even that sometimes it'd be like, but they haven't seen you do it in that direction. Maybe that is like, so often it's like you trying to show them what you think they want is just going to lead to not the right answer. And that's even more so, of course, in this process where there's not a single role they're casting at all. There's not even a pair of clothes you got to fit into. All right, let's wrap with you as a young dad. Now that you are a father, can you give a little advice to the parents in this process? And I know, of course, you've interacted with parents throughout this whole thing too. And, I have never felt more connected. I don't know if you feel it yet, because it's really in the past year or two that I'm like, oh my gosh, as I go through the New York kindergarten process with my and I swear to God, Michael, she has a pre-screen. She's already done a pre-screen audition for a gifted and talented school that she has to find out if she'll get a call back later in January. Is a whole. But anyway, so I'm experiencing. You probably haven't gotten quite that far with your kid, but what is the experience of helping these parents who are trying to navigate this process with their child? What advice or what insight do you have just from your years of doing that?
Yeah, I think this sounds so cliche, but trust the process. It's okay to live in those moments and feel the rejection, but then you have to throw it away and you have to pretend like it didn't happen. You got to just keep going forward because at the end of the process, what is always meant to be always happens. So my manager would always tell me that too. He was like, after auditions, just throw away your paper and let it go. And I was like, okay. And I think the good thing in this process is at least they'll get results no matter what. In New York, you don't even hear. I'm still waiting to hear about, 20 shows that I didn't book that I've already had.
From 20 years ago?
Yeah, from 20 years ago.
Yeah. So every once in a while, 10 years later, you'll get a call. You go, what? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I auditioned for the Wicked movie. I'm waiting to hear if I got it. I don't know.
There's a chance.
Thanks.
It's not out yet. Until it's out, you still have a chance. There's still a possibility.
So trust the process. It really is the ups and downs of it, and it's okay to lean into that. But the next day is a new day, and then just start from there.
I love it. It is cliche advice, but it is advice that is a cliche for a reason. It is. When people started saying trust the process, I'm a big basketball fan. That's the 76ers motto, is to trust. So every time I would laugh at it. Now it's become just, it is the thing people say. And I love it. It's a great one for the arts, for so many parts of life. You got to trust the process. Michael, if people want to know more about Point Park, if they're like, I love this interview, I want to learn more about Point Park, do you like them going to a website? Do you like social media? How do you sort of suggest people follow up and even dive deeper?
Yeah, I think the website's great. Also, all of our emails are on there. They can reach out anytime. I'm more than happy to talk to people. If they're coming to campus, I would love to meet them, give them a tour, hopefully sit in on classes. But it's very accessible. I think that's another thing I never knew too in college. But yeah, reach out. My email is on the website. And I would just love to hear from anybody, especially you, Charlie.
Especially me. And I do appreciate the way that you said tour. That's really very good Carnegie Mellon training. They give them a tour. You can really see the elements of that are shared. Michael, thanks for today. I really, really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. So many good things to take away from that episode. I really appreciated Michael giving us a bit of a view on that kind of behind the table conversation that he was having with Gary and with Keisha in terms of, what is a conservatory in 2025? Very interesting. That's not to say that other places aren't having that conversation too, but I did think Michael was really vulnerable and really transparent in his perspective on those conversations. And I think it's really interesting in hearing a real shift with what Point Park is doing in emphasizing the acting focus after being known as such a strong dance school. Again, that's not to say that that strong dance emphasis goes away overnight, but it really does feel similar to the conversation we have with those newer emerging programs when we'll often say something like, hey, look at this amazing program head. He went to Carnegie Mellon and then he taught at Emerson, and look what he's created with Five Towns. Or you say, hey, look at this amazing Shenandoah grad and what he might be doing with Slippery Rock, right? But that same thing really holds true here, even though Point Park might be a more established program than those other two. In getting a Carnegie Mellon grad in Michael and a professor in Carrie Klein, who was so involved in the musical theater curriculum at Carnegie Mellon, you're going to be absorbing a lot of the ethos of a Carnegie Mellon style program, which is so acting focused. At all those newer programs, they always talk about it. And then we always talk about this idea of taking the good of what they've learned in their educations, then combining it with what they learned in the industry. And then they're remaking a program based on what they think it should be. Well, why would that be any less true here, even though you're talking about a more established program? And I always think interesting for me, anytime we talk about kind of artistic focuses and there is a real answer, so often they'll give you a version of we're all three equally. And that doesn't mean it's not true for them, but you don't necessarily get a lot out of it where, I think Michael, probably the most common answer if someone was going to give an answer would be that they're more acting focused. And it's interesting in this case that Michael's giving that, having been what I think would be known as a more dance focused school. They're certainly known to have strong dancers. And I also think really interesting to contrast that answer, you're going to hear in a few weeks from Ryan Kasperzak, who I have on to talk about Montclair's program. And Ryan really talks about his pride in their strong dance focus and kind of doubling down on their dance focus. And again, that's not to say that both of these brilliant artists, both of whom are actually friends of mine, not just colleagues, but I really consider both friends. Of course, they also respect the other sides of those disciplines, right? Of course, Ryan really respects acting and singing. Michael really respects dance and singing, all those things, right? But, you heard Michael talk about, what he values in Point Park's dance program and how strong it is. I just think it's helpful to hear those different philosophies, and especially then how they might line up with what you're looking for in a program, both what your strengths are and then what you really think you're looking for. And speaking of that, I do just want to underline something that Michael said that I didn't really hear in the first run of the interview. As we were going, it just didn't stand out to me. But then as I was listening back, I really heard it. It is, I think, one of my favorite things someone has said on this podcast. And I'm going to paraphrase a little here, but it was this idea of not trying to get into every school, but by being your authentic self, you'll get into the right school. I think he said something like the school that values you will see you, or something to that effect, but which of course a perfectly good way to put it as well. But there's something about that idea of if you're trying to get into every school, you might not get into the right school. If I'm going to flip it around. So he says, please don't try to get into every school so that you will get into the right school. You'll get into the school that will value you. Our regular listeners will have heard me talk about this mission that I have. This is the next couple months. We're going to really try to dive deep into some of these buzzwords that you hear so often on the podcast. One of the big ones is about being your authentic self, being who you are. And so I want to have that journey and that conversation about self-discovery. And I'll talk about a little bit more about this later in this conversation as well. But to me, hearing that negative version of it, of don't try to get into every school, I think actually was a helpful way to hear it. Because I think a lot of our students do try to get into every school they audition for. And like, of course, on some level, that's what you're doing. You're not in the audition room to not get in, right? But what I think Michael means, and I'm going to feel pretty confident speaking for him after all that sweet flattery in the interview as I was trying to be his mirror. What I think Michael's trying to say is that idea is like, if you're trying to get into every school, and if the way that you do that is by kind of telling them what you think they want to hear, you're actually potentially blocking out the right school's ability to meet you and meet your actual and specific self. If you're always giving me job interview style answers about why you should accept me, I certainly understand and respect the strategy of that. But if it goes too far, it can actually register as inauthentic. It can seem like you're being a salesperson, right? You know, we love dating analogies on the pod. We do them all the time. But in me, the dating analogy is like, it's almost like being too smooth, right? Like, which for a lot of people, some people are like, oh, that's cute and charming. But for people, that can be a little bit of a turnoff, right? If you're all things to all people, you're kind of not perfect for anyone. We have all experienced in the dating world that person who feels like they're just like giving great date energy, like they're really good at it. But that also can make you feel a little bit like, I'll bet you say that to everyone, huh? Like, I'll bet I'm not the only one who's heard that answer, right? And in this world, I think that would be the equivalent of someone who's a really great auditioner or maybe a really great networker, like they're a really good talker, but that you don't necessarily then feel like you actually got to meet the real them. If you're giving me crafted answers that you think this is what Point Park wants to hear, it actually may be less of what Point Park wants to hear than it would be the actual the true you answer, even if it's a quote unquote worse answer, right? I always used to give that analogy for Pace when Amy Rogers was the head of Pace. She used to joke about this idea that everyone would throw on a leather jacket for her because Pace was the edgy school. So I think it was actually a coaching company that told all their students, put on a leather jacket for Pace, right? When, of course, for some people, that was just ridiculous. Again, not that you couldn't wear a leather jacket for the right people, you could, but you wouldn't want to put on a leather jacket just for that school if it's not who you are, right? So I think really the negative and the positive version of that holds true, right? We don't want you to hold up a mask, whether that mask is a leather jacket or that kind of false interview answer that tells them what they want to hear. And also the positive version is we actually do want you to do that active work of finding those specific things about yourself that are really true to you. And what that inevitably means, I guess that's saying me saying the good about the negative version. What that inevitably means is that some of those specifics, they're going to be turnoffs for some people. To go back to the dating analogy, if on a first date you said, I know for sure I want kids in the next 5 years, that could be a real turnoff for some people. It might end the date right there, right? But it wouldn't be a turnoff for the right people. And for those same right people, they might go, man, this person really knows what they want and they're pursuing it. Again, that doesn't mean you necessarily have to be that definitive. You know, that certainly would be a very definitive, I know myself kind of answer. You certainly don't have to speak in those kind of absolutes. Many of you at 17 don't know for sure those kinds of things of I know I want exactly this. So you don't want to say something that isn't for sure you if you don't know what it is, right? But all of those specifics, you know, as you're searching for those, whether that's hobbies or interests, certainly anything artistic that's specific about you, anything that can help distinguish you, those are golden nuggets that you should be pursuing. You should be searching for those things. Even if, and this is the point of all this, even if for some people, those specific things might be turnoffs, right? For more people, they will be interesting positives, even if you don't think they particularly line up with what they're looking for. And if they're authentic to who you are, hopefully they're going to attract the right school. The right people are going to go, I like that about you. I know how to work with that. And that's why I'm the right fit for you. And I guess, you know, that parlays us into that question of like, curiosity and self-discovery. Michael all said that really beautiful in the interview, which I'm not going to go super deep on here because, again, we are doing a bunch of this in our artist interviews in the next few weeks. I'm doing interviews in the next few weeks, but it's really going to be the course of the next couple months that you're going to hear them spaced out. So if you're interested, check out those artist episodes. If you want to hear more conversations about this, about sort of self-discovery, your journey, how you do that. You know, I'm having some specific people on. I'm actually inviting specific guests on to talk about exactly this, talk about these questions, because I think it's one of those things where it can be a little bit of a cop-out of like, be who you are. And you're like, what is that? I don't know what that is. Though, of course, for those who are regular listeners for today, you know I'm going to love and underline what Michael said about this. You know, he talked about living with the questions versus knowing who you are. Certainly, we've heard that on the pod. You and I agree on that as listeners, right? And that idea of you're on the journey. You don't have to have it arrive at the destination, but be on that journey authentically. We all love all that, but more on that soon. We're going to try to go beyond the buzzword a little bit in some of those conversations as well. The other thing I wanted to highlight was Michael's dual use of the word connection, right? Michael talked about connection. He talked about both the student's connection to material and what he was searching for there. That was cool. And then he also talked about Point Park's responsibility, or his responsibility, in connecting you and helping you find connections to the outside world. And, that is a specific subset of these universities that speak that way and that really back that up. Of course, we're going to see what that actually looks like for Michael in Point Park as he goes into his tenure. He's still early in his tenure there. But there are those schools that try to kind of give you the information over the course of the 4 years and then prepare you to be really self-reliant and then feel like, hey, I don't think you should need me after that. And then there are those schools and those program heads where they really play an active role with agents and managers and casting directors and are going to really involve themselves into your career. Not necessarily that one is way better than the other, especially if the school is really good at the former. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to play that active role. But I do know for our parents and students, hearing that idea, hearing about that kind of connectivity bridge or that connection bridge is really enticing. And of course, I understand why. And then I won't say much about these last two because we're already running long, but just a quick underline to that idea of being private and public and trying to let go of your self-consciousness. I love that Michael said that. For those who've yet to film your pre-screens, if you're out there and you're filming next week, please don't forget about that vulnerability, that idea of letting us in, especially behind the camera. It's hard, but it's so important to let us in. And of course, that connects to some of that idea we were talking about earlier of your authentic self. But I know for 17-year-olds today, it's not just about being your authentic self. It can often be a really conscious and difficult step to pull off and remove the mask and really let us see you, because that defense mechanism is there. We want to sort of protect ourselves and to actively go, no, my job is to let them in even behind the camera. So again, check out that recent episode with Molly Griggs. That was just last week's episode for a deeper discussion there. And we'll do more of that in the coming weeks and months as well. And on that same episode, at least in the takeaways, we talk a little bit about risks. And I really like that idea that, Michael talked about there being no rules, at least for him, other than the idea of basically trying to follow the time format they ask for. But, basically that's how I phrased it as well, that he said it with a couple fewer words, but basically of what worthy artistic risks you could take in exploring whatever you want to do, if it's a supported artistic choice, but don't bring in a 5-minute monologue. So it doesn't mean there's truly no rules or there's some risk that you might not want to take, but the idea of going, you have the whole canon, you can choose whatever you want to choose. And with that audacity of me trying to tell someone not to take too long, so trying to ask for brevity as I'm 10 minutes into an outro, we're going to wrap another episode of Mapping the College Audition, produced by Meghan Cordier and Kelly Prendergast, with social media work by Jordan Rice. Please follow us wherever you like to follow us. Like us, subscribe to us, leave us that sweet rating and review on those podcast platforms of your choice. And of course, reach out to mailbag at Mapping the College Audition. That's mailbag at Mapping the College Audition with any questions or feedback. And you can always head over to MTCA.com for any help with your individual college prep processes. To my young artists out there mapping their journeys, please trust that you're enough for the right school, but not every school, exactly as you are right now. Now keep striving. We'll catch you next week.